From the studios of KENW on the campus of Eastern New Mexico University, it's You Should Know, featuring the people and events of Eastern New Mexico and West Texas.
Welcome to a special version of the You Should Know program. We're going to discuss something that is happening nationwide, and it's happening in one of our viewing area towns right here close. So we'll have this special program. We don't usually have debates or political discussions about individual towns, but we're going to do that for the city of Clovis. What we're going to be talking about are cities, towns, states, people that want to require voters to have a photo ID. And we'll talk about both sides of the issue, and we'll take care of that on this program. I'm going to do the very best I can to divide this up absolutely equally. We'll see how good I am at that here in just a moment. But first, I want to introduce both of our guests. On my left is Carolyn Spence, and on my right is Constance Williams. And we're going to begin with Carolyn Spence. Carolyn, you are in favor of having photo IDs. This will be on the ballot. Tell me more about the situation in Clovis and why your organization has done this, and more about yourself. Tell me something about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this. I think information is always very useful. And I don't think we've had much dialogue. There's a lot of misinformation out there about what the voter ID initiative is all about, even in Clovis. Now, in Clovis, it's actually an item on the ballot that was promoted by the High Plains Patriots. And the High Plains Patriots is just a conservative group. They are not really a Tea Party. They do have both Republican and Democrat members. But it's a very loosely organized group that tries very hard to promote conservative issues and to hold government accountable and to support constitutional issues also. Now, the main thing with the ballot that we have here, I'd like to read to you the words that are on the ballot because it'll give you a little bit of background on what they're trying to accomplish. This ballot item initiative says, shall a new section be adopted to the Clovis City Charter that reads, the Clovis City Commission by ordinance shall require voter authentication by photo identification for municipal elections. Now, the selection of the words is very important because this really doesn't have to do with voter fraud as such. It has to do with elections and having qualified electors who are already registered to vote be the people that are actually showing up at the polls and casting ballots. In some areas, even absentee voters need to prove that the person who cast the ballot is actually the elector. So you could call it elections fraud, which is an issue that people don't necessarily think much about because they really don't see that it has had a history. Now, we've been working with Hobbs passed a similar initiative a year ago. Albuquerque has had one on the books for 10 years. And Rio Rancho, I don't know exactly, I think it's been 2 or 3 years that they've had theirs. And we are doing this in cities, and I say we loosely in that they are generally people who are concerned about the ballot. They're concerned about making sure, because we get a lot of stories throughout New Mexico of all kinds of things that happen both with registration, with actual ballots that are cast, with the numbers that show up. And so this is just one of the most basic initiatives that can be taken where a person who comes to cast a vote actually will be able to identify that and authenticate that it's the true voter that's there. Now, in Clovis, there was an attempt at fraud once, which was not exactly this kind. that was just actually within the last 2 years. I think it was, the 2 years ago. But what happened was someone came with someone else's ID to register. That's not this issue. But the person they were registering in the name of was somebody that was in prison, and that person's name was on a roll, and therefore they caught it. The person did not get to register. And so, but that same process where someone who's in prison, someone who's at home, someone whatever, other people can come, and as you know, we've got a very low voter turnout in municipal elections. So with a low voter turnout, there's ample opportunity for people to come and say, I am so-and-so and I'm here to vote. And we do know that we had incidents in the last election, not necessarily in Clovis, our voter turnout was very low, but where people came to vote and find out that they had, quote, already voted. That's just, the integrity of our vote is so important to us. It is an important thing to do. The more lax we are about it, the less people care about whether they vote or not. We'd like to have it become an integrated value that you've got the right to vote. If you look up on Wikipedia over voter ID and the right to vote, you'll see the history. The history is huge on what people have gone through to be able to get the right to vote. It's almost a crime that we have such a low voter turnout, and we want to make sure that we establish the principle that this is a valuable thing. It's at least as valuable as buying a pack of cigarettes or buying beer at the counter. So you should be required to be able to identify that you really are the person that's there. Now.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're gonna pause now, and
Okay.
and we're going to allow Constance to speak to us. Constance, you are opposed to this.
Yes,
Tell
sir.
me about yourself, and then tell me why you would oppose what has just been explained to us seems logical to us. So talk to me about that.
Alrighty, my name is Constance Williams, and I'm a student working on my master's degree at Western Mexico University, and I'm a local Clovis resident. And essentially, yes, I am in opposition to this because largely it's not defined. There is not a written down within this resolution what voter authentication actually means and what voter ID will qualify. And that in and of itself gives me hesitation to let me sign off on this, to allow the city commission to define what's going to be an ID. When in New Mexico, we just Saturday, I believe yesterday, they signed in to act the Real ID Act for New Mexico. So that really adds a larger complexity to this issue that the city not necessarily should define what voter ID qualifies when we're figuring out on the state level.
Okay, and so how do you feel about voter turnout? We mentioned voter turnout. Do you feel that this would help or inhibit?
Essentially, I feel that this would inhibit voter turnout because it doesn't do anything to encourage voters to come and express their views. It essentially comes at the starting point of the voter process, which is when you go to the ballot box, and when you're requested to, show an ID at the ballot box, that is the opening moments to whether or not you're going to continue on in the process. If you do not have your ID at that time, then they say, okay, well, you can't vote, or you have to go through steps A, B, C, D, which have not been defined. At the current time, you can go to the ballot box, you tell them your address, you tell them, they can ask you questions, what are the last four of your social security number, and things of that nature that I feel at this point validate you at the ballot box. Whenever you want to introduce this legislation or this resolution, like I said, it's not defined on how are they going to particularly identify you. Are they, if they base it on anything like the Hobbs resolution is very loose on what qualifies as a ID, as long as there's a picture on there, that's a qualifier. And I don't believe that having your picture ID that's not a state picture ID, anything else, a union ID, a professional association ID, doesn't give me the satisfaction that this person is necessarily who they are, because people, it's a digital age, people can modify identification easily. So that's, there's a plethora, it's almost like a festival of IDs that are available with this Hobbs resolution that allows you to participate in the process. And right now, the county and the national level, it's pretty solid on what allows you to qualify as an elected or as an elector. So I feel like it's already defined. This muddies it up.
Okay. Is there an organization that you're a part of that you kind of represent, or is this something that you just feel on your own?
I felt it on my own. Initially, I learned about it at a, the Martin Luther King Commission meeting. I'm part of the board there. I learned about one of the members had told me on an offside that, hey, this is going on. And at first I thought, okay, well, ID, we got to have IDs. That's part of it. But the further I got into it and looked at it, that essentially it's not defined. All these things are up in the air. That gave me more concern, because at this point I have the right to go to cast my ballot. I have the right to do it freely without any form of intimidation, having to validate who I am. Why do I want to regress further into having to prove to the poll workers or whoever it may be that I'm the person that I am, whenever I've gone through the steps to register? I've shown that initiative to register at since I've been 18. So I'm part of the system already. Why do I need to take an additional step to participate in my local elections?
Okay. We're going to spend the next 12 minutes of the show allowing you to kind of converse with each other, and I'll sort of be the referee. I don't have a stripe coat.
There is some misinformation, so I would like
Oh,
to
okay.
that.
So, would you like to reply to anything
yeah.
that Constance has had to say?
Yeah, let me just clarify some issues here. Hobbs and Clovis are home rule cities, but their charters are different. In Hobbs, you're able to take a citizen's initiative and start an ordinance that puts an ordinance in place for how you'll do something. In Clovis, citizens' initiative is not in the city charter. So for anybody, this initiative can't be even done by, and voter, anything that happens with the elections is also not in the city charter that's on this level. Therefore, for the city to be able to make an ordinance, a change had to be made in the charter, and that's why this is so broadly defined, because there is not an ordinance that allows this to happen. You can't define every detail and put it in the city charter. All this vote is going to do is allow the city fathers and the city commission to join together and prepare an ordinance, and there'll be a lot of input to that ordinance before it passes the city commission. The city commission are the elected representatives of the citizens, and believe me, they will be taking a lot of input on how this is carried out. So even if this passes, it doesn't implement anything yet. It simply allows the city to go in that direction. Now, for instance, in Albuquerque, they've had this there for 10 years. And yesterday, I understand that the state voter ID bill, which is different than real ID. Real ID has a whole nother subject that has nothing to do with voter ID as such. But the voter ID bill that was proposed by Catherine Brown from Carlsbad and Nora Espinoza from Roswell did come out of committee yesterday. And in that, they, of course, defined what will be done at the state. But one of the things that happens is at the city level, we get to test out is this good? Is it bad? Do we generate complaints? Do we keep people from voting? In 10 years, there's not been one complaint from Albuquerque that someone was not able to vote. They've made a way for everybody to vote. And therefore, that is something that we would want to have happen, absolutely. But we'll have a chance to work that out with the city if this should pass.
Okay. Let me ask you, Constance, do you feel that if something like this passed, you are adequately represented by whoever represents you in the city of Clovis so that your feelings on this would be taken care of?
In my particular district, I felt that the commissioner who represents my district was not in line with my personal view. And at the city commission meeting that happened November 30th, which is really a hotly contested meeting, it was split. 4 against and 4 opposed, and the mayor actually voted in favor of putting this on the ballot. So I don't know how effective it's going to be to have 2 opposing entities trying to iron out all the wrinkles in this broadly defined resolution. I think that and again, we're going to be having an election come into play in March. So once that resolution gets passed, who knows who's going to be put in place. And I don't know, like I said, whether or not people will be represented. There was a lot of people who felt, who spoke at the meeting and who felt that this was a regression in voting rights. And, that didn't fall on deaf ears and on my ears. I think whenever the commission split, that showed, hey, we don't want to deal with this issue at this point because there's too much opposition on, it's splitting the community. And whenever it was voted in favor to put it on the ballot, I can understand why, because you want to say it's America, people can have the right to choose and to vote. But again, when you have such a low voter turnout and people unaware of the impact that this will have on their voting rights, it's a sticky situation. So.
Okay. Are you afraid that there will be some people in your district that will not vote if they are required to have a?
I don't know if I don't know if they won't vote because that. I just know that having to go over an additional hurdles will probably turn some people off. Why should we be required to burden ourselves additionally to go vote? We have registered. We have shown our desire to voice ourselves, but why should we have to go even a step further for that voice to be heard in our local elections? It's not even a state mandate. It's not a federal mandate. And again, when we have, it's basically a beta test. We want to see whether or not it's going to work out and stuff. So we're going to have a whole generation of people who turned 18 this year happening, who are going to have, who don't necessarily have a clear, concise way of what the voter expectation is going to be, because over the next 5 or 10 years, while we're trying to test out to see whether or not this works locally, there's the state level that stuff is happening at that has different requirements. And are we going to then turn it over in 10 years when we see that it's ineffective or it's not necessarily meeting the needs or what we identified we wanted to do? So again, we want to talk about civic engagement, and why would we create a whole new set of regulations that may or may not pass? It needs to be handed down from the state level that, hey, this is the expectation. There has been legislation that's been introduced to standardize elections across the state. Go ahead.
Okay, good. I want to come back to you, Caroline.
Can I answer the question?
Yes, you may answer the question.
Real quickly.
Yes, go ahead. No.
The reason
Go ahead. Yes. Why is it?
Is simply so that you are the person who votes. That's all that there is to that. It is not anything to do with your voting rights. It has nothing to do with deciding who votes. It has nothing to do with how you register. It has nothing to do with whether you're legal or illegal or otherwise. It's just establishing. And this is not a beta test. However, when we do it, we're going to prove whether or not it does work. If Albuquerque is any example, the minority turnout has increased in places with voter ID. I think people appreciate the fact that the vote is valuable more when they are required to do something about it. It's not a big deal. It is something that's important. And the answers that I'm listening to are very contrived over why we probably shouldn't do this. Quite frankly, it's a simple issue. Let's just know who you are.
Okay, go over for me, if you will, what's required to register in the first place, if you're familiar with that
I'm a
process.
little familiar. I do register people, but you do have to show an ID to register. That is true. And you have to be a citizen, 21 years of age, and identify your 18. Excuse me. I'm old enough that it was 21 at one time.
Me too.
And then we did. I still don't wear seatbelts easily either. You know, we just didn't have them back then. And they do have to sign. If they've not, if I go and get you to register to vote while I'm at the grocery store, when you first go in there, you're going to have to show an ID because nobody's ever seen one that's at the registrar's office. So there's an ID involved already. That is true. But there's going to be a lot of other things happen. I just kind of want to bring this up and mention it to you. In the long run, yes, things are going to get standardized. For right now, we do what we can where we can. But for instance, did you know that driver's license photographs that are collected by DMV are shared with the Secretary of State's office? And sooner or later, we're going to have the database, and it will be either photographs or maybe thumbprints, because I've also got that mechanism working, where you go in and they can look at you and look at their own screen, and you won't have to bring your ID, but the same issue will be accomplished. I don't know if anybody will have reasons why that shouldn't happen, but they might. And I really enjoy seeing the Iraqis and the people from India come out with their thumbprints all showing that they voted. They look very proud, and of course they do vote in much better numbers than we do.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you're correct that, there is legislation that suggests, hey, let's have an interface between the Secretary of State and the Motor Vehicle Division. So with that already on the state level working its way down, why does the city need to spend the money to implement this on this local level when it's going to be, it's essentially a duplication process, because we are getting validated at the at the county registrar's office. If you haven't shown an ID prior to your initial casting of the ballot, you do have to show that. That's being validated at the county and state levels. So that's my question. Why does the city have to, again, hey, are you the person that you say you are? To me, it's a community divider. It says, hey, I don't trust the person in my community to be who they are. And I don't think that that's a building blocks towards strengthening the community. It makes people suspect each other and makes people feel, hey, well, why should I trust this person to say who they are? They just want to come vote,
We used to have polls in different communities, and frankly, most people knew everybody that came to vote, and I think that was kind of what was expected. But now we have the centralized voting places where people don't know them. So yeah, they are going to ask, just like when I go to get something and I have to show my ID, even though I'm obviously over 18.
I have a question for both of you. Obviously, a driver's license, New Mexico driver's license has our picture on it. By the way, they used mine from 2 years ago. I really appreciate them helping, but I'm just kidding. At any rate, do we expect, either one of you expect to have people who have to pay to have a special ID made so they can vote?
That will be up to the city commission to decide, but everywhere else it's not. Any NID is provided free of charge. Now, Does DMV give IDs for people who are not, I know my brother had one. I don't know if he had to pay to get that, but I think that would be the issue, is the city would have to decide that.
And see,
Yeah.
and that's they do give IDs. It does cost, and that is a barrier. But if we did, if the city decided, hey, we're going to go ahead and require people to pay for
Right.
or we're going to either require people to pay for their IDs, or we're going to offer them, either which way, city taxpayers are coming out of their pocket to do this, because nobody's
minimum
gifting.
Okay, all right. Thank you
Got it.
both very much. I can't believe it, but we've already run out of time.
I think we covered it pretty well.
You've done very well. Constance, thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate your point of view. Carolyn, thank you very much for being here. The two of you are welcome. We'll turn these big hot lights off. You're welcome to carry this conversation on for a long time if you'd like to. I hope that you have learned about what is going on in the city of Clovis, because it is going to happen in the United States. The same issue is happening all around the United States, all over the state of New Mexico, and we hope that you learned something from watching this special edition of You Should Know.